Let's look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, the Detroit Lions had a very successful season, finishing 9-8, finishing with a very good offense, a top 5 offense in the NFL, as well as really having the defense come along late in the season to help them start winning some football games. But that doesn't mean the Detroit Lions are perfect. The Lions had a lot of weaknesses last year, and they had a lot of holes that were exposed pretty often by teams with the ability to do so. And today we're going to talk about the biggest needs for the Detroit Lions going into the offseason. Because despite having a really good season, despite having a winning record, despite having, playoff aspirations and playoff hopes going into the final week, there were still a lot of problems and a lot of issues with this team, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, that need to be remedied by the start of the 2023 season if the Lions want to reach their ceiling, if they want to win the NFC North and make a run at going into the playoffs. So, with that being said, let's get right on into taking a look at the Detroit Lions' biggest needs going forward into the 2023 offseason. Now, starting off with the offensive side of the ball, because there's not very many needs on the offensive side of the ball. The Lions were a top 5 scoring offense in the NFL last season, and they really didn't have any holes. The receivers were good, the running backs were good, the quarterback play was great, the offensive line was elite, and even the tight ends, without having big names or big production coming into the season, all contributed throughout the season. However, if there is one spot where the Detroit Lions could potentially look to get better this offseason, it is the right guard position. The right guard position was kind of a rotating door, right? It was a revolving door all season with guys like Logan Stenberg, Evan Brown, and even Dan Skipper coming in and playing that position at some point during the season. And although they weren't horrible, they weren't the worst guards in the NFL, that position does need to be fixed, whether that be Big V coming back, returning to the team, and remaining a member of the Detroit Lions in 2023, or getting cheaper at the position, going in on day 2, maybe even day 3, and finding a plug-and-play guard that can come in and be a 17-game starter for the Lions that can both affect the run game as well as be prolific in pass protection. Now, I think the best option for this Lions team as far as the right guard position, solidifying that spot, is pretty simple. Stick with Halapaloe Vaitai. He was a top guard in the 2021 season before his surgery. He looked really good in the preseason this year. He's a little bit more on the expensive side of the guard range, but at the end of the day, if you have the potential to get an elite guard in the NFL, then maybe he's worth elite guard money. I have a video coming out about that later in the week, but as far as the offense, that's really the only hold. Everything else was solid, right? You can add some more depth, you can add some more role players, but as far as big needs, big stars needed on the offensive side of the ball, there really aren't any. The only thing you could really say is maybe draft a starting caliber tight end, but again, Brock Wright and James Mitchell did a pretty good job when they were asked to step up and do so. Defensively, however, there's quite a few needs, as the Detroit Lions really struggled on the defensive side of the ball. And despite having a pretty good turnaround at the end of the season, the Lions finished the year just ranked 28th in total defense, which is bottom 5 in the NFL. So what do the Lions need to improve the most? I think cornerback is the biggest need for the Lions this season. A lockdown corner is a necessity for the Detroit Lions because they haven't had one since Darius Slay left the team about 5 years ago at this point. The Lions have really struggled at cornerback. Darius Slay left and Okudah came in to replace him. Okudah hasn't replaced Darius Slay at an all-pro level. Okudah's been okay. He's been about starting caliber. He's had some really good games and some not so good games, but he isn't the all-pro caliber that Darius Slay is. He isn't the all-pro cornerback that's shutting down wide receiver ones every single week, and we thought maybe we had that in Amani Oruwariye. Turns out we didn't. We thought maybe we had it in Jeff Okudah. Turns out we didn't. The Lions need a really good cornerback. They need somebody that can step out on the field every single week and take away the wide receiver one by themselves. Now, whether that means a trade, something more drastic like maybe Jalen Ramsey, or if the Saints are shopping Marshawn Lattimore or something of that realm, then I think that's also an option. Or you're in a really good position at 6 and 18 to get a potential All-Pro in a guy like Joey Porter, Cam Smith, or somebody that truly shuts down the opponent's wide receiver one while still kind of using and incorporating some of the depth guys like Okudah and Jerry Jacobs going into next season. But the Lions don't have a cornerback. When they have good corner depth, right, Jerry Jacobs is good, Jeff Okudah is good, but they don't have an All-Pro. They don't have a Pro Bowl caliber corner. I think if they did have one, it would really help the defense take a huge step and take a huge jump to the next level and be ready for playoff competition. Now, another position that was severely lacking this season was the safety position. And this isn't necessarily the biggest need for the Detroit Lions because Deshaun Elliott was very good. And if Deshaun Elliott comes back and then you add Tracy Walker, who's coming back from injury, and of course Kirby Joseph, who broke out, and even Ifeatu Melifonwu, who had some good moments late in the season for the Detroit Lions, the safety position might not be the biggest need in the world. But that's the problem. Deshaun Elliott might not come back. The Detroit Lions have not re-signed him, and as of right now, it seems like maybe Deshaun Elliott is one of the players that isn't quite willing to maybe take that pay cut, and even though he was great this season, Deshaun Elliott may be asking for a lot of money this season and may be willing to go walk somewhere else to go get paid a little bit more money and go play for a different playoff caliber team. I am not totally sure if the Lions are going to re-sign Deshaun Elliott, what that situation looks like, because I don't think he is necessarily the biggest need, knowing the Lions draft capital at the moment. But I think that regardless of what happens, right, Aaron Glenn really likes to run 3 safety sets. So let's just say that they re-sign Deshaun Elliott, right? And you go out with your 3 safeties of Tracy Walker, Deshaun Elliott, and Kirby Joseph. Okay, one of those guys gets hurt, and now you're playing Ifeatu Melifonwu, who has 2 games of starting experience at the safety position. You could use a little bit more depth. You could use a little bit more help. And for a team like the Lions, especially that runs 3 safety sets a lot under the Aaron Glenn defense, safety depth is arguably more important than linebacker depth, arguably more important than maybe cornerback depth, because you have so many safeties and really, in general, so many defensive backs on the field at a time that you really need 4, 5, 6 starting caliber players to really make that secondary work. And although Kirby Joseph was great, and although Tracy Walker is great when he comes back, and hopefully Deshaun Elliott returns as a Detroit Lion, adding more depth, adding a safety in the 2nd or 3rd round that has ball skills, that's a good leader, somebody like Jordan Battle or Tyler Nubin from Minnesota could be a really good option for the Detroit Lions. Or they could go out and sign another veteran safety, right? They could go out and sign somebody that's a little cheaper but has been around the league and kind of knows his way around. Either way, I do think the safety position still needs to be addressed, even if it's not necessarily the #1 pick or the #1 position of need for the Detroit Lions. Now, defensive tackle was a huge hole for the Detroit Lions, and I wouldn't say that it was horrible this year because Isaiah Buggs came in on a cheap deal and played very well. Same thing with John Kaminsky, and of course, Aleem McNeil is continuing to play at a very high level, but that's really the problem. That's the only 3 guys that the Detroit Lions have. And they need more talent. They need somebody that's going to be able to rush the passer from an interior, because while Isaiah Buggs and while Aleem McNeil are great run stuffers, they don't allow a lot of run. They absorb double teams and get their linebackers a lot of opportunity. They don't really have a Christian Jones. They don't have an Aaron Donald type threat in the middle that can just absolutely wreck a game. They don't have somebody on the interior that can beat one-on-one really quickly. They don't have somebody to draw double teams on passing downs like Aaron Donald or Christian Jones or Kenny Clark or any of the elite defensive tackles in the NFL, and they could really use that. Somebody that's not only great in the run or not only great against the pass, but somebody that can do everything at an incredibly high level, and somebody that is a Pro Bowl level tackle, right? The Lions have a lot of depth. The Lions have a lot of talent on their roster, but they don't have a ton of superstars, and that's where they really need to add this season. Somebody like Daron Payne, somebody like Dalvin Tomlinson, somebody like, Jalen Carter in the draft if the Lions are so lucky to be able to get him. they really need a pass rusher. They really need a good all-around defensive tackle that can stay on the field all 3 downs, that can affect the play every single time and isn't necessarily reliant on scheme or play style or, depending on whether it's a run or a pass, whether you're on the football field. So I do think defensive tackle is a big need, and I do think it would be the most expensive need for the Detroit Lions, whether that be addressed through free agency, trade, or the NFL draft. Now, the last position I wanted to talk about was the linebacker position, not because I actually think the linebacker position is all that poor, but I do think they can add a little bit more to it, right? Alex Anzalone was pretty good. Does he miss some tackles? Yes. Is he great in coverage? No, but he is a great leader. He is a very good voice in the locker room, and he is, like it or not, incredibly productive for the Detroit Lions at the linebacker position, and I would not be surprised if he returns for his 3rd year in Detroit. Derek Barnes had quite a few good games before injury and really started to show what he could do with the linebacker position, while Christian Rodrigo was arguably the best linebacker steal in the draft, or, at least off-ball linebacker steal in the draft, being taken in the 6th round, but starting from day 1 and really being an impact player at that position. But that doesn't mean the Lions can't address it. Somebody like maybe Noah Sewell in the 3rd to 4th round. Somebody maybe a little bit earlier in the 2nd or 3rd round, right? There's a lot of linebackers, a lot of productive linebackers in this class that are off the ball. Some guys are specialized in coverage. Some guys are more run stuffers. There's a lot of roles. And really, at this point, the Lions could use anything they could get, because outside of those top 3 linebackers, they don't really have a whole lot, right? Chris Board was okay for the Detroit Lions, but I don't think he will be back on the roster next year, right? You have Josh Woods, but he's more of a special teams player, special teams captain, great leader, but not really the biggest linebacker. And that's your 5 guys. That's the 5 guys that's on the field or on the team. So if you really want to address that position, I think building more depth. I mean, if you can go out and get a superstar, of course, go and do that, right? If Levante David wants to come, or if, for whatever reason, some superstar linebacker decides to come join the team, but more likely than not, you're going to be stuck with whoever you have in the draft, and I think there's good value in the draft. Like I said, Noah Sewell from Oregon. There's a nice linebacker out of Arkansas. Trey Sanders is very good. Trey Simmons, I believe, from Clemson is a very good linebacker if you want to take him early in the 2nd round. There's options for the Detroit Lions there as well. So, with all that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Really just talking about the biggest needs going into the offseason, looking at what Brad Holmes is likely going to target, look at what Brad Holmes might be looking for throughout this 2023 offseason, and really kind of getting an idea of what direction the Lions are going to head going towards free agency and the draft. So with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below, what position of need do you think is the biggest? What position do you want to see the Lions address the most, address in the biggest way? What player do you think we should spend money on? What player do you think we should draft? Be very curious to hear what direction you feel the Lions should go this offseason. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, and as always, go Lions.